try.
Which I think is a huge mistake, because children pick up languages very, very rapidly. And once they've got the germs in them, then they can indeed be developed.
What about you, Amir, in Another Gulmahatri and the Lydia relationship with Osman?
That character just came to me from the blue completely. I was just on a platform one day waiting for a train, and I saw an autumn leaf and saw in my head an English woman painting that autumn leaf. And then I had to find the story, but bit by bit real narratives kept coming into it and enriching the story. In particular, one couple whom I won't name because I never knew them, I just read about them. A writer and his wife who was an artist, actually an illustrator. And there were coincidental similarities between what I wanted to do and what their careers were like. And that's what it came from. But I never really set out to write something about an intercultural marriage. It really just happened. I know that sounds disingenuous, but it was not a plan. I think what I probably did want to do was to write something, perhaps unconsciously, about someone English, because it's a side of myself that I possibly hadn't expressed enough in my writing. I mean, I had been so concerned all the time with crossing the seas in my writing in one way or another, or looking, to distant destinations, that the place I lived in was always a place only inhabited by foreigners all the time. And the locals only came in playing walk-on parts. So, I was interested in having a character explore her surroundings to the fullest. And then, of course, as writing will, it took me to another place, and she ended up in Pakistan and living the rest of her life there. So it became a novel largely set here in Karachi.
I've got a lot more questions I'd like to ask, but I think probably now is the time to do the readings, and then we'll have questions from the audience, maybe some more questions between us, if there's time. But
do we have time?
Well, we certainly have time for the readings, so who would like to go first?
Well, I think we can just say that those of you who feel you need to leave for Karen Armstrong at 3 o'clock, just do. Don't at all feel that you need to stay. Will you go first?
You go first.
Okay. About how many minutes?
So we say about 7 minutes or so?
Okay, I just have a few pages. This is a section from my new novel, The Cloud Messenger, which is published on the 2nd of March in London, and I hope it finds a home in Karachi as well. This is a time when Mehran is 26 years old, and he's just had a very difficult relationship which is breaking up or is at the beginning of its end. So it took me 36 hours or more to get back to London. I traveled via Milan, changed stations at Paris, took the ferry at Calais. I cried on the boat and pretended I had hay fever in the sunny August weather. After Ricardo's sudden flight, I knew that our relationship would always be full of interruptions and breaks. I had always wanted to hold on to her, missed her while she was away and found her elusive, so I gambled my body for love, thinking that once we were lovers, I would have a bigger place in her heart. I had failed. Looking at the whitish waters of the Channel now, I was making other plans, dreaming for the first time since 1979, the year I dreamed of going off to Shiraz or Isfahan to study Persian literature there, once I had learnt enough grammar from Lady L. Now again I wanted to travel, to write essays or poems, or a short film script perhaps, to live for a while in another country. I thought I should write a doctoral thesis, or at least go along with my tutor's suggestion that I write one. Then I would settle down with someone and have a child while I was still young. No room in my life for a secretive lover. I took the train from Dover to Victoria and reached home dirty and disheveled. Ricardo came back to London in early October. We met in the lobby of the Hilton in Holland Park and were sipping coffee in the open-plan bar. Ricardo had ordered a cognac to go with her espresso. It was 2 in the afternoon. She was again the Ricardo I'd first met, perfectly groomed in her lightweight dark blue jacket and knee-bearing skirt, her shoulder-length hair unusually pulled away from her face. My father had given me an open ticket to India as a graduation present. I hadn't been able to go back to India with my mother when my grandmother died as I was in the middle of my exams, but the time, he said, seemed right while I was in a transitional phase. I'm going to India soon, I told Ricardo, and she, who was always weighing her wings to fly, seemed not to understand. I'm going to skip a little and read 2 more passages. Memory is a bad storyteller. It erases all the real twists in a tale. But when I look back, it seems that all the narrative time allotted to Ricarda and me was 9 days in August. 5, or was it 4 days of passion of herself and those Roman hours had been her spontaneous gift to me. After that, her love became something she granted me or loaned me because I was importunate. Even when I remember the days we spent together, I could sense in early autumn what I hadn't wanted to see in late summer. She had counted those days day by day, and then she had counted each hour, as you might count out the notes for a loan of cash. That the loan might be one she was making to herself, I did not stop to consider. All I felt was the burden of a gift too expensive to reciprocate. Or worse, the weight in my shirt pocket, chafing my breast, of a loan of notes and coins that couldn't be repaid, only returned without interest. We met several times, often in public places, over the next few weeks. One night, after a showing of La Femme du Boulanger at the NFT, I refused to take her home when she said I should. In that no man's tract between summer and autumn, we walked up and down in a bridge over the Thames. I can see us clearly. She's wearing a belted cream raincoat like a man's in a beret. I'm in blue, sleeves rolled up to the elbow, a purple sweater slung over my shoulders. But I can't hear what I say, just a few cracked and headless sentences about needing freedom, space to find my direction, and then I fall silent. Talk to me, tell me, she says. I respond, but I thought I had. Let's not meet till you come back from India. I think it's she who says that, and I who want to say it. A narrative of love Ricard doesn't mind that is fated to remain unfinished. I won't attempt to give it closure here.
And from Meatless Days, Sarah?
Yes. I'll read a few paragraphs from a chapter on my sister Ifat. I need my glasses. At first I thought she was the air I breathed, but Ifat was briar. Before my mechanical bellows hit the air to take up their fanning habit, Ifat had preceded me, leaving her haunting aura in all my mother's secret crevices. In the most constructive period of my life, she lay around me like an umbilical fluid, yellow and persistent. I was asleep inside her influence when I did not yet know how to sleep. In later years, such envelopment would lead a curiosity to my regard, which was uncertain whether an inward musing would not suffice, since there was so much of her inside me, in place of what it meant to look at her. But how could I abstain from looking? For if Shahid was the apple of my eye when I was 6, Ifat belonged to a more burnished complexion and was the golden apple of my soul. Was she twin, or is that merely my imagination? Could it be possible that one egg in its efficient subdivisions became forgetful for a while? My company of cells went wandering off, bemused and was not missed, until 4 years later they remembered to be born the sleepy side of Ifat. It cannot be, for she was twinned before my time, her face already raising to the power of some other number, which danced about her shoulder like a spirit minuscule. And she needed no lessons from me about how to conduct her always instantaneous sleep. Sleep would come and hold her like a membrane does, until her voice at night was the only one I've heard to tell me quite so clearly, there are 2 chords inside my throat. Once it was the day again. How I could listen to those humming things, which cajoled each other, danced and ran, in the manner in which her face ran too, weaving in and out of the eddies of her voice. They worked in unison at display, both brilliant and precise as water, when water wishes to perform both in and out of light. So of course I was not needed to make effort to. Before I had even dreamed of number, she had enacted out a multitude. There always were, for instance, several voices in her single throat. I thought of it, the trick of Iffat's speech and the colloquy that it conducted with her face, when my friend Jonathan was kindly driving me through New Haven's unloveliness. He was driving me home, a kind thing to do, and it set him brooding on all the other words that he could be kind to me. It's all very well, you know, to be obsessional, he said. We were driving down a one-way street. But why do it so thoroughly? Arrest yourself in a prosopopeic posture that retards you from your real work. I looked out of the window at people shoveling hateful snow. Maybe this is my work, I'd suggested finally. Jonathan's hands left the wheel in a way and a moment of abbreviated exasperation, but then he softened, liberal towards me. All right, so now you have to write about your sister's death. Nonsense, I replied indignantly, and then the subject changed as we reached home. But later on I wondered about that conversation and the scandal in my voice when I cried out, nonsense. What did it mean, I wondered. Then I realized what I must have known all along. Of course, Iffat's story has nothing to do with dying. It has to do with the price a mind must pay when it lives in a beautiful body. I'll stop there.
Thank you both very much indeed for that beautiful. We've probably got time for 2 or 3 questions because we started late. So does anyone have anything they'd like to ask Sarah, Amir, or both writers? Yes.
I was wondering, it's a rather silly question, but could you talk a little bit about the words that are going around in your heads these days? I mean, I assume you have some favorite words that sort of stick there. If that is the case, could you sort of comment a little bit about what's happening these days in your heads in terms of diction?
In fact, that's not a silly question at all, because my current project, which is driving me crazy, is I'm doing something jointly with my sister. The last time she visited me, she said she'd love to look at some of the old letters that my mother wrote me when I was in America. And if you saw the disarray of my papers, you'd have nightmares. I know I do. So I was rummaging through these files, and lo and behold, I found a file that was full of my mother's letters to my father that were written just after the Second World War, before they were married, and while they were going through the terrible conflict of, on the one hand, a Pakistani family saying, "What are you doing?" with an Angrez, and an Angrez family saying, "What are you doing with this scoundrel?" And so as my sister and I have begun to write back and forth to each other about these letters, I find myself overusing the word nostalgia, because I don't want to be nostalgic about this. Of course, it brings up a well of nostalgia in me. So that's my example.
I go through long phases of complete silence after I finish writing a book, and I have no desire whatsoever to write for quite a while. And I never push myself. So at the moment I'm going through one of those phases, and I think if my brain says anything to me, it's usually music. It's usually wordless humming or songs in a language I don't know.
It switches off almost?
Yeah, it switches off conceptually.
First of all, thank you both for that wonderful session. Sarah, I know in the 90s you worked with our mutual and much missed friend Agha Shahid Ali on a book called Ravishing Disunities, Real Ghazals in English. I wondered, in the course of working on that, and Amir, actually, I would want to hear your thoughts on this as well. Do you feel there are certain poetic forms that are particularly suited to one language rather than another? So is the ghazal more suited to Urdu than in English, in the way that we hear that